Thank you very much, Brian. You're right. It seems like it's a old home week when I get to come back and produce another yet fun webinar for On One. And this one's even more exciting, this series, because now we're using and playing with the new Perfect Photo Suite 6. So if any of you have already been able to purchase that and use that, then you kind of know the excitement that we're going through. And for those of you who are still on the fence or interested in trying it out, you'll certainly enjoy this. And the reason that this has been successful for me as a wedding photographer is we're constantly trying to, as Brian says, is to create a style, create a look for your photography, and that's kind of why we titled it, to whether we're adding color or some style or fashion type of look to the images is what we're trying to achieve. And I think that for me as a wedding photographer in this market that we're in is that there's so many other people trying to emulate and certainly trying to do wedding photography. So, for me, after doing it for 30 plus years, you want to create something that's a little bit beyond just a normal photo. So that's why I've embraced it. And so those of you who've tracked my Facebook or Twitter and so on, you'll always see me posting these updated images, and they're exciting. So again, we'll run through a few images here, and then I'll certainly take you through the suite just to show you my favorite parts of it. Certainly all the images that I do are taken on the wedding day. A lot of people ask me if I do workshops, and these are models, etc. But I'm very proud to say that every single image that you see is actually taken on the job. It's taken from a wedding. I don't have the luxury, just due to my schedule. I do run a studio here in Orange County, California, so I don't have the luxury of traveling and doing seminars all year long. But certainly these are taken from every single weekend that we're doing an event, and so that's what's exciting. It's a whole different part of, instead of being able to shoot models and stylize it, we're excited to be able to not only capture great images, but certainly now when I come back and create the final product for the client, this is what we're kind of going to talk about today. So let me get out of here. I'm in Lightroom right now. And those of you, again, who have used this or are still getting familiar with it, you can certainly access the suite through Lightroom. And today I'm just going to go direct from here, so I'm going to close this out. And right on the screen here, I've already launched the Perfect Photo Suite 6 ready for us to go. So let's get right into it. What I want to do is try to go through 3 different images, and for now, if I get a little bit more time, I'll show you a few more. In fact, let me pull up a folder here because I want to show you just a little head start in case I run out of time at the end. Usually I like to show a few before and after photos that you can kind of see here. So let me show you a couple examples. But here's a little quick thing before we get started. I show this, and any of you are going to WPPI, I'm doing a program there on Tuesday, and this is kind of a little sneak preview of what I talk about. But basically, here's a little scenario that I talk about. I don't really try to do my programs or seminars, and even one like this, to kind of just show you how to use all the tools necessarily. I try to assume that you already know this. You already know how to work the controls, especially whether you're in Lightroom or Photoshop. So I like to guide people to what am I looking at when I look at an image. What's the inspiration that I'm getting? And I think as a photographer, 2 quick things. One, for the first 20 years of my career, all I studied was just lighting, exposures, composition, traditional darkroom work. So that was an inspiration on its own. And so today's climate of digital photography, now it's like we have our own digital darkroom. So for those of you who says, wow, how do you enjoy doing this so much? And it's because of the days of doing it with chemicals and enlargers. I mean, that was quite difficult and challenging and expensive. So for this to now allow me to be in control of my images, it's quite amazing. So let's step forward to this one. This is just a quick image. I just want to show you what my quick thought pattern is when I look at all my images. And this goes back to the days when we were doing with film. So if you look at this image here, what we normally would do is since this was taken, let's say, not this one was not taken on film, but when it was, I would have to communicate to the lab. And if you look here on my screen, I would have to indicate areas that I wanted darkened. I'd have to indicate areas I wanted lightened. So the communication to the lab was for us to maybe either mark this print up. That's what the first image you saw I posted on here. The areas here that I put maybe in circle would be dodging. The areas in markers would be to darken certain areas. And then I'd have to add additional notes, maybe on a piece of paper, saying to soften certain areas, because retouching was done on the negative, retouching was done on the print itself. So this was the thought pattern when we had these images going to the lab. So today, that's what I'm going to share with you. What am I doing to each of these images? So the whole point of this, and let's go to the finished image, is to draw the viewer's attention to the subject matter. And that's the consistency of what I'm trying to do with each of my photographs, is that whether it's through darkening here, you see that the other part here where we actually had these two images, let's put them side by side here, you can see that where here I've darkened the edges, perhaps keep the attention away from the bright area here. You can see on the right it's quite bright. And all the attention, in this case, I want it to go to the bride's face and not to the dress area. I'm darkening the whole area on the outside. So these are just some of the little quick things, and a lot of the images that I'm working on is to really just create a view, an area in the photo, within the photo, that my viewer can look at and not get confused on it. So this is a little quick step, and I go through that on my workshop showing several images. So let's take you into this suite itself, and let's start out with an image like this one. The first image I chose is to show you probably in this suite, probably my favorite function that first was introduced here, and that's taking us into the perfect portrait. Now what I did, for those of you who have used this or not have used it, I should say, I went into open, I selected the image, okay, because this is a standalone application as well. So for those of you who are not using, again, Adobe Photoshop, or you're not using Lightroom, you can still use this program without it. So all I did is hit open, I'll select that image, and there you go. Now if you notice up on the top right, you'll notice in this area, these are all the applications. These are all the softwares within the suite. So you've got layers, which you're in now. You've got the perfect mask, perfect portrait, perfect effects, the blur, which again is for those of you using this like I have in the past, it's your focal point, the perfect frames, and of course the resize. So those today we're going to focus on the two of my favorites, and that's the perfect portrait and the perfect effects. So let's select that by simply just clicking on that, and it's now going to launch that application. It's going to bring my image into that portion of the software. So as it's dictating this particular image here for me, first thing you're going to notice is putting these brackets around the facial. It's basically a facial recognition. The intelligent thing about this software, which just blows my mind, is that in the perfect portrait, this is where we're doing the softening to the skin, the enhancing of the eyes as far as the darkening, lightening, the whitening of it, the whitening maybe of the teeth. You'll see, I'll take you through step by step how this has been pretty exciting. So if you notice here, these brackets, let's start with that. This software has already pretty much selected the skin area. And a lot of times people ask me, what about this area here? Well, I can, with the brush that's included here, I'll show you, you can actually soften all of the skin here. But right now, it's pretty much doing a facial detection on that as well. So what I'm going to start out with, if you select up here in this top corner here, you notice these are your toolbars up in this section to the left. You have a retouching brush, and I'll kind of take you through 2 or 3 of these features. The retouching brush is a great feature. Let me zoom in here for you before we go to the first step here. And I'm going to lower this down a little. I'm going to bring this. Now what I'm going to do, first of all, this kind of defaults. If you notice on the right-hand panel, we're going to talk about this here as well. If you notice on this side, I'm going to go lower up and lower this down. You'll notice that they're kind of hidden here on my screen. We'll kind of go step by step for you. But I'm going to turn this off because when you first launch it, it kind of defaults at a few settings on its own. So I want to keep this as sharp as possible. Now this first brush that we selected is going to allow me to do some minor retouching on the face. Now let me just back up for a second, because I always get the question of, are you going to darken, you're going to lighten, you're going to do color correcting? Well, most of that answer for that is that I've already done that, perhaps whether you're doing, which I shoot in RAW format, so I maybe have already done that in Lightroom. If you're using Adobe Bridge through Camera Raw and doing your adjustments, your color corrections, your density, that's pre-done before you get here. Once we get into this particular applications, pretty much we're doing the finishing of these images, okay? So this particular brush that I've selected, the first one, allows me just to click on that image, just a one click. So any little, maybe last minute little blemishes areas, without having to hold down the Command or Control key. In Photoshop, it's selecting it itself. That's how intelligent this is. You don't have to control click around. All I do is click on areas, and it's already removing some of the little spots that I may have already missed. Now keep in mind, this is up to your workflow. A lot of times I'll be in Photoshop maybe before I come in here, because I've already done some extensive retouching on the bride's face. A little bit, some have a little bit rougher skin than others. I may have already completed that, But now that I zoom in here and I want to add a little more touch up, that'll allow me to do that before I get into softening the skin tone. Okay, so that's a great feature. Even here, I'm on the shoulder, I want a little area spot there. All I'm simply doing is just clicking on it, and it already selects that area itself. Okay, so that's my first step. So okay, she looks pretty good already. Now the next one here, you notice there's a little face here. You select on that one. That's your skin refine brush. Now, what you saw earlier, those brackets around the face, where the software has already detected the skin, the area that we're working on. If you go up down here below this area, you notice where it says current, and you select on this little section here, and you want to look at overlay. These are all the masks that this perfect portrait has already created around the face. It's masked out everything else other than the background, meaning just the skin tone. So when I select overlay, take a look at it now. Everything that's in red is not going to be affected when we start softening the skin. So this particular refine brush, let's say it bled over a little bit here. I don't want it to soften the eyebrows. I can clean that up a little bit. See that? I don't want it to soften, because right now this particular section of the perfect portrait is going to allow me to soften the skin. So anything that's in red is not going to be softened. So if it bled over a little bit, and I can come back and redo this. Now if you open up there's an inspector down here below. If you look on the toolbar on the left, if I hit the I as in inspector, it opens up a adjustment panel for us. Okay, so if I want to lower the opacity of the brush, I can do that. The feathering of it, the brush size, that can all be done at this inspector window. Okay, so that's where you get that. So if you hit I, it'll turn it off. If you hit I again, and it's over on the left hand, the bottom section of your toolbar, and that's where it opens it up. So as I'm painting in, and if it has the same shortcuts as Photoshop, so if I hit X, it's going to allow me to paint in. Which you see here on the right side, it says paint mode is now paint out. If I hit X, I'm going to paint it back in. Okay, so there's a little quick shortcut. So if you're power Photoshop users, you're going to love this, because a lot of these features are the same. Okay, so let's close this out. Let's go back to my current view. When you notice where it says white, dark, it just gives you several other options. Some people prefer their masks different colors, so you have a choice. If you hit the original, obviously it'll take you back from the original one, and certainly the current is the one we're working on. So here we go. Let's set this up for you guys. So everything's been masked out. You saw that the software already masked the face pretty close to perfect for us, right? I just did a little fine tuning around the eyes, but everything in red is not going to be affected by this first panel that I'm working on. So if you come over to the right side with me, here's where the magic became for me when I saw this. You've got these pretty much 5 sliders allowing me now, my first step, you saw me do a little retouching, okay? Now I'm going to soften the skin a little bit. Now this first slider is another little bonus slider that if the bride or the subject matter has a little bit extra bumps, I call it, blemishes, if you play with this, a lot of times I'll exaggerate it, and if you look at it closely, obviously she has beautiful skin, so it's not going to be as pronounced, but the other day I had a high school senior, had a little bit more bumps on the face. This is going to detect some of the red areas on the face and soften that up for you, okay? So I encourage you to play with that. Same with the smoothing. Encourage you to kind of play with that. It kind of smooths that out a little bit. So again, this would be at your taste. If I take it to the right, I don't know about you guys, but every time I get sliders, I like to just crank mine all the way to the right. Try that. I encourage you to try that. The reason I do that is it allows me to always see. I like to push the limit to these filters so that I can see really what it's doing. So I'm going to do that as well. If there's any shine, this is remarkable. A lot of times if you're shooting with flash at the reception, you want to tone down some of the shine on those highlight areas, which is usually the nose, right on the forehead, under the top of the cheekbones. This works great with that. And then, of course, same with the shadows, any of the dark areas. Okay, so this is all concentrating on adding a softness. Now, those of you who have tried, and I think we'd all be in the same position, we have multiple ways of softening skin, multiple ways of retouching. And the reason I like this is because it's already doing it ourselves. Now, I didn't mention yet, but if I had put the bride and groom in here, by the way, because people ask me this question, if I put the bride and groom portrait in this and imported 2 faces here, the software would have detected both faces for us. That's amazing. It would have already detected both faces. If I put a family of 4 people in there, 5 people, it'll detect it pretty good. And again, by having that pre-made mask for you, And using the brush, I can go back and refine it if it bleeds over. So you'll have to take a look at that and add more people. Now, lastly, here's I call this the magic slider, because the number one reason that photos look too digital, as they call it, too over retouched or fake, whatever you like to call it, is because when you soften, whether you're doing a Gaussian blur, a surface blur, whatever the blurs you do in Photoshop, you notice it's just so smooth here. So if you ever seen some of the professional retouchers, I always say in Hollywood, their number one thing is to add softness and clarity and smoothness to skin, but they want to retain the texture in the skin. So here you go. If there's one thing that this thing is produced for us, it's the texture slider. So by pulling this over, and again, this would be at your taste, I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit just so you can see that. This allows you to now add a little bit more texture back into the skin, so now it looks real. So if I showed you a before and after, I don't know if you can see on my screen, I'm doing the Command P as preview. That's before and that's after. Okay, I'm doing it very slightly. Now once you apply this and this gets exported out, then you really see the refinement and how sharp that is. So that's what that allows me to do. Now I've got a perfect skin with texture, and that's just amazing for me. So the number one reason I like this is because if I'm doing a wedding album, I want it all to be consistent. I can do 4 or 5 photos on an album page, and the skin tones, the colors, in this case, the smoothness is all the same. So you're not having to reinvent that in Photoshop every time, so it's very quick. And that's the reason I can create a lot of these effects, similar effects. Obviously, a lot of us can do that as well in Photoshop, but it's about saving time. It's about the performance, about doing it quickly. And if you're doing a wedding with 150 images, 100 images in an album, you don't want to spend that. And granted, they don't all need that, but it makes your images look really nice. All right, so let's go down to the next one. You've already got the smoothness going here. How about the skin tone? Okay, a lot of people, if you haven't played with this one's amazing because what it's done is also detected and on one is created the different scenarios for different ethnicities of the skin colors. And this is kind of if it sees a little bit of a darker skin tone, it's going to pick up on this selection. Obviously, a Caucasian, etc. Certainly, it's kind of already created that skin tone. And all you have to do is simply choose this slider. So if you want to warm up the image a little bit, this is where I could do that as well. Okay, now obviously this would be at your taste. The same thing with the strength of it. If you want it, if it's a little bit too strong for you, if you want to even back it up a little bit. A lot of times I find myself trying to just kind of back it up so it's not oversaturated. Again, this is a great tool to allow you to tune that as well. Okay, and again, most of my corrections have been done in advance, but lately there's some images that I want to quickly do this on the fly, and it allows me to do that. Okay, so this is a great tool. And what On1 has done with their research is figured out skin tones, figure out true skin colors. And a thing that I try to explain is that if you are in Photoshop and you're using obviously the saturation slider, the vibrance sliders, and you didn't color correct the image properly, and it has a cast of cyan or blue in an image, and you're accelerating your vibrance, accelerating saturation, especially in the wedding gowns, you're really exaggerating colors like blues and cyans. So here, you're working with actual skin color. So this is what's amazing. You've got to really try this out, okay? All right, so let's move down to the next one. Now, this is another one that has to be one of my favorites as well, okay? I know they're all my favorite. You guys are probably laughing, but this one I love. Now, the way you activate this mask, because right now we're still in this entire face, is you now come down and select. You see over on the left-hand side? I'm going to hover the mouse over that. Now you've got your eye refine brush. Let's work on the eyes, okay? Now, not only did this software detect the whole face, the skin, but it's now when we activate the eye refine brush, it now is going to put a mask on everything other than the eyes. In other words, let's activate that. Let's go down to the overlay. There you go. And I didn't do this in advance, all right? This was done by the software. It's already detected the eyes. Now that's amazing because we haven't done anything yet. So all I'm going to do is open up that inspector, which is your little window for your brush adjustments, okay? And again, remember I talked about it says paint in, okay? If I want to paint in areas, which in this case I want to paint out because it's kind of bled again over to the maybe the eyebrow area, etc. And this would be totally up to you, okay? And I'm just kind of doing this kind of quickly. I use a Wacom brush so that allows me to get real fine and zoom into it, okay? So now let's close this out. Let's get back into the current view, okay? And let's come over to the right-hand panel here. Now you're going to go into the facial features adjustments. Now the first section here is we're working on the eyes. You've got 3 sliders. And we're going to work on the strength of the eye. I'm going to turn these off just so that you can see where we're starting from. And take a look at the eyes. Why don't you look at when it says strength, I'm going to exaggerate that. And that somehow creates a little bit of sharpness to the image, to the actual eyes, okay? Now here's the slider that's worth the big bucks right here, because now you want to do a little whitening. I'm going to crank this over, and I want you to look at that. Take a look at the eyes. Okay, it's now adding white to those eye area. Even in the catch lights, I notice it'll add a little bit of white to that. And then clarity. How many times, a lot of times you want to just sharpen, just kind of get that sharpening around the eyes, right around the iris, around the eye itself. And by using, there's your clarity slider. Now that's, there you go, take a look at that. So if I go before and after, so that's before and that's after, okay? I'll try that again here for you. This is before, okay, and that's after. Okay, and I'll zoom that in at the end so you can see the both of that. So that's with the eyes, okay? So that's detected that. Now, how about the mouth area? Now, usually I'll select the bride. I know a couple times I've shown people brides that don't smile, so this demonstration doesn't work. And I think I kind of cheated here. I picked a bride with so nice of white teeth that it's kind of hard to show you how great this works. But anyways, let's now select the final one that I use, which is now the mouth refine brush. And it's doing pretty much the same thing. If I come down to the mask, hit overlay, and see now it's pretty much did the same thing. And all I have to do is open up the inspector window, same thing, just clean that up, make sure I don't have any red, the mask along, because it's going to work both the lips, this last tool here, it's going to work our lips, and it's going to work the teeth. Okay, so let's clean that up a little bit. And like I said, this one's cheating on this photo because I didn't pick a bride with really yellow teeth. But anyways, next time we'll do that. But anyway, she's got great teeth. But anyways, any of your clients, any image you use, that's what you're going to do. So let's come back to current view. And now let's turn the sliders off. There you go. In fact, I can already see it already. Yeah, it was already applied. Because remember, once you import this here, it's already got some default settings happening here. So I like to shut them off so that I can start from the base. So let's first of all look at the strength of the mouth. Same thing. It's going to add a little sharpness to that. Just kind of sharpen around the edges. It's like an edge sharpener. And now I'm going to crank this white. Now let's really give her some white. Now look at that. Now we can see her from outer space. Now take a look at that. All right. So again, at your adjustment level, everybody has a different taste. You don't want to overdo it either. So, and then vibrance is now going to work the coloring, which is basically around the lips. So now, again, if you want to just bump up the saturation around the lip color, there you go. Okay. So now, if I weren't talking to you, I probably would have done this image probably in less than 3-4 minutes. I could have been done. So quickly, when I zoom into this, let me zoom in even tighter for you guys. There we go. Get it super close for you guys. And so if I go before and after, here we go. Let me zoom in a little bit closer. There we go. So this was, here we go. This was before. So if you look at it real close, you can see the kind of the pores in her skin and the lines and so on. And this is after. Now, the other things I probably would have done before I got into there, I'm gonna back it up so you can see without all this effect, is I would have softened under her eyes here. Probably, you know, obviously in Photoshop, I would have cleaned this up in advance, okay? And any other additional areas, any hair coming in, I would have kind of cleaned that up way in advance. That would have been done in Photoshop. Again, color correction would have been done certainly as well in Lightroom before it came in here. But this allows me to do my finishing. So when we look at this, is that what are we doing to finish this product? So finally, there's your preview of it. Soft, the eyes are white, the skin is soft, looks natural, and there you go. So this is one of my favorite features. Look at her eyes, it's just amazing, okay? Now, technically, I'm going to close out and open a new image. If I was continuing with this image, I would have now applied this over in the right-hand section. I would have applied that. And then I would have re-imported that and maybe add some effects to it. The effects would have been perhaps darkening edges. I would have been enhancing other colors. So that's why if you're working in here, I'm using layers, I'm using perfect portraits, perfect effects, I'm using blur, and I'm using frame. And when I go to the lab for gallery wraps, I'm using resize to add the extra 2 inches around the gallery wrap. So once you get in this software, you're hooked. You can't get out of it. Okay. So again, just to reiterate, when I'm coming into this applications, I'm finishing my product. I've already done all color corrections. Okay. All right. So let's cancel this one and close this out. And let's go open a new image. Okay. Let's move in because I want to do 2 more images for us because there will be a test. I hope you guys are listening here. All right. Okay. So let's select, here we go. Let's select this one here. Let's select something a little bit closer or a little bit more full length so you can look on the overall. Now the last couple ones I want to take you into now is I want to work in the perfect effects. And that's the module that you'll see where I stylize these images, where I can accelerate colors and tones and so on. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip here. I'm going to back up for a second here. I'm going to give you a little quick tip here, okay? I'm going to sneak a little tip for you guys, for those that may not be at my workshop. The biggest thing that I talk about in regards to images and image correction, image adjustments is basically my number one concern about it is take a look at this image here on the screen. I'm going to zoom into it. Actually, let's select this first, and you'll see it in a minute. So if you look at this image here, just real quickly here, just so you can see, this is where I would have already gone in Lightroom and really kind of tuned it, because I'm not against, by the way, if you're in Lightroom, and I know that I work in the develop module, I can spend hours tweaking all my images if I want to, but technically, when I convert a raw image into a JPEG for a client, I don't do all this adjustment right here in Lightroom to them. I want to give it a very clean, simple look because I want them to pay me for my time to add these adjustments. I know you and I we love spending hours on all these adjustments in Lightroom, right? We kind of camp out here in the develop module and your adjustment brushes and so on. I can spend hours with you on that. But my goal is when I show this to a client, take a look at this real quickly. Take a look at the darks in there. You see how it's really dark, really just gives it a real mood to the image? Well, this is the image right next to it is the one that we're going to work on that I actually export out. Okay, you ready to see how dark that is? Here's the one that I use. See how this is kind of flat like that? That's the way my images come out of Lightroom. I'm going to zoom in one more time. Not like that. And the number one reason, my little tip of that, is because I can add contrast. When I add effects, whether I'm doing darkening, I'm adding other contrast adjustments, I'm doing blend modes, several blend options. This all starts building on my contrast, and it's very difficult to bring that back, okay? So every day it seems like more and more my images are getting flatter and flatter right out the gate. So what that means is that, yeah, this looks great right off when you're doing proofing. It looks very rich, but when I go to production and I try to add effects to it, it's going to get eaten up. Okay, so let's close out here. That's my little quick tip for it. So now we're back into our perfect suite, and I'm going to now, I've already opened this image, and when you open it, it defaults here in your perfect layers, and I'm going to select the effects. Okay, so let's click on that, and there's the image that I showed you that's kind of a, I guess you want to call it a low contrast look to it. Okay, if I zoom in here, I kind of show you that, and it's because in a few seconds here, you'll notice that as I start building effects on here, it's already going to do that. And I want to have detail. I want to make sure that my whites have some detail. I want to make sure my darks have detail. So I'm working on both. Okay, so here we go. So what you're noticing, we just launched Perfect Effects. This one, again, what can I say? I can spend hours just producing images in here, which I do. And by the way, I don't have any issues saying that if I want to spend, 10 times longer an image, I will. I enjoy doing it. I know I hear people say, "Oh, it takes forever." I don't like doing that, but I do. I can tell you that I am a computer junkie on this end. I love to create. I love to capture images. But let me just say real quickly, the reason we buy these plugins and we add software like this to our toolbox, let's call it, is because you need inspiration. Okay, so people ask me, Frank, how do you just come up with all that stuff, right? Well, basically, I don't think I could have done it without a program like this. Why? Because they have already created, and you look here in the bottom, and all these effects library, that's what it's called, and they've already pre-created all these different looks for us. Now, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of effects that I would have never thought of. Now, obviously, as you start getting more advanced, and all you do is hover your mouse over this, and it now shows you the effects, and it's like, wow, and I'm now inspired by some of these effects. So when people ask me, how do you come up with it? Well, a lot of times it's a combination of things, but most of the time I give credit because I am using the Perfect Photo Suite. And of course I use other applications, of course, like we all do, but this is why, hands down, I said, you know what, I have to have this. I want my images to create a different feel to them. And how could you have, other than looking at other people's work and so on, how would you ever push the envelope? A lot of times people want to create things other people do, but when someone has already created these effects for me, all I have to do is choose a style that I like. Okay, so let's take you through how this works. Again, I'm hovering over some of these images. That's what you're seeing below, some of the effects. It shows you a great window, a preview with my image. That's what you're seeing in all these effects. So let's start out, and I don't necessarily go any particular order. You notice all the different effects here, but I'll show you a couple things. So when I first see an image like this, I want to look for coloring. Usually I go into coloring if I want to accelerate colors or de-accelerate colors in the images, okay? So basically you have a choice of black and whites, which I love. You can add borders on the fly here for ourselves. So I'm going to pick on color and tone. You can do whether it's auto contrast, some of these images you feel you're working on, you want to add some clarity to it. You can just kind of go through here and select each one. Now this one, let's say, just since I'm already in here, I'm going to say I want to do a little tonal contrast. I'm going to just click on it one time, and it's added a global effect on here for me. See that? Global. Now a lot of times, those of you who are experienced at doing lots of enhancements, you realize that most of the time we're doing it, even though these filters are a global production, we are going to actually have an opportunity to apply it wherever we want to apply the file with the brushes. So if you notice here on the right hand side, this is where you have the options. You've got a stack here instead of what we call it layers in Photoshop. It creates its own stack layer, if you want to call it, of that file. So before I move on, I can actually add some enhancements here. So what I'll do is select the brush up in the top tool area there on the left there. You see that? So that's considered your masking brush. And I'm going to hit the same shortcuts we did. The little I here, I is inspector, and there's your same adjustments to your brush. So if I don't want this to be global, I can either paint in or paint out. Remember that by hitting the X key or just selecting this. I can hit invert. Now it's gone. So now I can just select with my brush and choose to now with that add this tonal contrast in the areas I want. So maybe I just want the floor in this area. Maybe I just want some of the background here. Take a look at that. Maybe I just want to paint this in. So that's what I love about it. I have the option of just painting in. So all my images that have multiple layers to it are because I'm painting in certain areas. I don't do anything necessarily globally. I'm just kind of saying maybe I want to do sharpening. Now if I want to obviously lower the opacity, I'm going to close out of this. I can also adjust that here, okay? So yet there's more next to this. So now I want to add another effect. I still want to add that color we talked about. I just had that. So what I'm going to do is over on the right hand side on this pane, I'm going to select add. So you now notice I have another empty layer. So let's go back into, let's go to the darkroom here. The darkroom effect, same thing, has multiple effects that you can choose from. If you want to add some grain to it, some people like a bleach bypass. You want to do like a fashionable high school senior. If you want to add some film, I love this Kodak Plus X125. Reminds me of the black and whites I used to do. Detail, we did earlier. There's another series of details to this, okay? How about my photo filters? There's the one that I want to add a little warming to it. So you see right here where it says the 85 warming, these are pre-made filters. So you can select any of those, okay? Red enhancers, okay? You can click any of those. Now, here's another one. As you start getting more advanced, let's say this is just the effect library, but if you select here, see up back on the right-hand side, effects options, you also have an option of doing some of your own custom enhancements. So if I want to hit color enhancer, okay, I can actually come in here and select any of the colors I want. So I can select if I just want to work on the yellows in this photo, okay, and I come in here and I just saturate the heck out of the yellows just for the heck of it. See what I just did there? I'm going to open my inspector. Okay, well, let's first hit B for brush. There we go, and then it'll activate my inspector. I'm going to invert that, and I'm just going to paint in the effect. Okay, I'm going to paint in that yellow, and I am exaggerating it so you can just see the colors on your screen. So I can paint in whether it's blues, reds, anything I want. So if I don't like any of these here, or if there's some that I want to just accelerate more, I can build that right here myself. Okay, not bad, huh? All right, so then you noticed up here, there's my color enhancer. It's still there. Now let's say I want to add another effect. I'm going to hit add. And let's say now I want to add like a texture to this. Now this is probably one of the #1 things that drew me to the perfect effects, and this was the textures. So if you have third-party textures you have to import, you have to load a CD in your computer, you have to download it. This is already pre-built for me. So again, going back to when I said where do I get my inspiration, here it is. I can select any of these. So if I just want to add, I just kind of go through, I let my mouse hover over that, select any of these I want. Some already have some warm tones built in there. Okay, so you can, I just kind of cruise through all these and see which ones I like, and then kind of add the effects. So I'm going to select this one right here called Rawhide. I'm going to click on that once. There you go. Boy, doesn't that look great? All right. So again, the beauty of this is that in this, it adds that on the stack side. Again, I can hit my brush, open the inspector, and what do I want to do? Do I want to paint in the effect? In this case, I want to paint out. So I'm going to click paint out. You can either click here or hit the X. Now, a lot of times, see that when I click like that, you'll notice that now I'm slowly taking that out. Okay. Now, here's a secret to that. Many times, you see how we're at 100% brush opacity? I always recommend starting out slowly. So you don't necessarily want to always at 100%, so that you can kind of add a glow around the image. And I'm kind of doing quickly here. And there you go, just to kind of highlight them. And if I want to zoom into the faces, I'll make sure I am at 100% because I want to see the faces here, right? Now, by the way, when I am doing this, I am normally zooming in at 100%. Again, I'm working with a Wacom tablet so I can paint real closely, okay? So I'm very careful what I do. Now, if I think it's too dark overall, here's your strength slider of that same effect. So you have that option, okay? There you go. So many options to this as well. And by the way, if I keep hitting add, I can add some other effects to this. If I want to save this, because I have made several presets. If you click here, presets, what presets are, as you probably know, obviously working in Lightroom, that these are already pre-made effects that I've created. So what I've done on the right side, if I want to save this, which I have, I'll come up here simply to under preset, save preset, title it, okay, like this one down here says frame grunge look or yellow texture. What's supposed to say yellow texture? Warm vintage, high detail. I just select that myself, okay, and I can save that. So you have an option of later on reproducing that same thing. And these are shareable too. So eventually you would see these on the On One software website. They are going to be featuring some of these. But certainly it allows you to take these. I have a laptop I take on the road. I have a desktop, so I can share these back and forth so I can repeat that same effect. So that allows me to save that. If I'm ready to keep this as is, all I do is simply hit apply here in the right-hand corner, and now it'll export that out for me. Okay, so quite simple. That's what I really enjoy. All right, so let's cancel it because I want to show you one more image here. Kind of give you one more effect, a look at this here. And there you go. Now it just reverts back because I hit cancel. So again, that's why I encourage you to play with the different effects because there's just so many options that you can choose from. Okay. All right. So let's open another image here. Let's go in here to open. And yeah, it's so many times what happens is I'll make some that are black and white. Here's an example here. Some that are more colorful. See, I'll just show you before and after here. You see that? You'll see that where I've taken some of the images and where I start from. And if any of you are going to be at WPPI, you'll certainly have many of these there that you'll get to see firsthand, and I'll create some of those for you. But here's another one similar to that tone that you just saw. Again, taking the image on the left. Here, obviously some of this post-production was done in Photoshop, but ultimate effects are created there too. So it allows me to do some really cool things. All right, so let's open one more image here for us and give you another example of that too. And again, there's many of these that I too, when I take them in there, I may create 2 or 3 effects. A lot of times my images will have 2 or 3 effects to it. In fact, let me see if I can just show you here real quickly, because people love when I do that. Because a lot of times, like here's an example. This one I just have two options that I built in there. And again, if you, let's see if I have one more here, you can see sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 effects of that same one. Let's see. Well, maybe I'll pull that folder when we're done here, just for sake of time, I should say. I'll see if I can come back and find one of those for us. Okay, let's come back and open that, yeah, because it's in a different folder. All right, so let's go back into and pull one more image here for us. Here we go. All right, let's select this one here just so you can see one more time. All right, So here you go. So once again, this image has already been color corrected. I've already done some density on it. A lot of times when we're working on bridal dresses, same thing. I'm trying to keep detail. The tuxedo, you notice, or suits, same thing. I'm trying to work with detail. It's very easy for us to get hung up if you're using Lightroom to hung up on that black slider and just make it look really dark and rich. But again, it starts looking a little bit too fake, so we want to see detail. So same thing with this one. Typically, I wouldn't go in the perfect portrait in this because the faces are kind of a little bit far away from me, so I don't really need to really go into that, but I will go into the effects one more time, and let's close this out, and let's just add a little bit of effect on this one for us real quickly so you'll see. Now in this particular one, same thing. If I'm creating a black and white out of it, take a look at it here. You'll notice the black and white, by the way, I will do at the end. That's my little tip for you. I don't add the black and white to the end because if I want to do any sharpening or any darkening to it, I want to be able to see that in the color version before I go to that. So in this particular case, if I go to detail and I want to do a texture boost, I'm going to click on that. Okay, and let's come underneath here for that. Let's lower this down. There we go. So you can see that. So remember, here we are globally once again. And a lot of times you'll see this here, and many times I'll say, okay, again, I'll decide at that point, do I want to either use the brush and take some out, which usually I don't like to overdo the people, over sharpen them. And by the way, that's what I mentioned about sharpening images. I like to sharpen sometimes just the subject matter. If sometimes if they're a panoramic like this, I can probably sharpen the whole thing a little bit, but I try not to compete with the subject matter. So anytime my portraits are filling up the full frame, I'm much more closer. I stay away from sharpening the subject so sharp versus the background. In other words, if I can put it a little bit easier, if you do a global sharpness, your eye is too confused, unless it's a scenic. So in this case, if I want them to stand out a little bit more, then I will simply, same thing, I will paint out and soften around the effect, okay? Because then what you're trying to do is you're trying to create the viewer's eye, the attention of the viewer to the sharpest part of the photo. Now, I'm not opposed to kind of adding some effects to the walls or anything like that. Like in this case, I want to come back and I want to add, let's say here, I want to hit the X and paint in a little texture in the wall. So I'm very careful where I do that. I don't just like to do a global on anything because, again, I want the attention to go. So that's what happens with some of these effects, is when they're so so overpowering, your viewer has no idea where to go to, okay? So that's what I always recommend when you're creating these effects. There's a lot of choices to that, okay? So now we added the texture to it. So if I want to add another one, same thing. Let's say I want to really add some more texture to this thing. You've got another texturizer. See, take a look at this. So when you start playing with that, now take a look at this. You thought the below had a lot of stuff. Take a look in here. This allows you to select and preview just by holding over each of these, the effects. So if I really want to grunge up the wall, take a look, add a little crack paint to it. I think some of you've seen some of the images I've done like that. The concrete, just adding some really crazy effects. There's some text, which I wouldn't use there. Dirties it up a little bit. So I invite you to look at each of these and play with them. Look at this endless of ones. And this is where I think part of the #1 way I get inspired is because this software has allowed me to do that. Without this, I would not have known that I could have added these effects. So take a look at this. Now these also have blend modes. So if I don't like the color in here, even though they pre-made this texture in a warm tone, and if you work with textures, you know that if a texture already has some type of base coloring in it, we either have to desaturate the textures, or yet if you're familiar with working blend modes, certainly you have that option of playing around with that as well, okay, working some of the blend modes. Even if I take my brush, open up my inspector here, same thing. I'm allowed to do the same thing. If I don't want it so warm on them, I'm going to basically paint out the effect. Okay, I'm going to paint out the effect on it. Okay, just like this. All right. Now, I made this, I'm going to show you something. I've exaggerated the color out there, and I'll show you why I like to do that. Okay, so I'm just cleaning them up, and I'm doing it kind of quickly here. I'm just cleaning them up. All right, now you see this really, now you're texturizing everything, and you've added colors to everything. And so now, for me, this is, if I left it like this is kind of not my type of photo, because I said to the view in the very beginning that I want the attention to go to the viewer, right? Okay, So if those of you listening know that I mentioned that. So let's add another element to this. So I'm going to hit add. I've got textures on the wall. I sharpened it a little bit. The couple's fine here. Because this texture that I chose already has a warm base on it, I don't need to really add more colors, though I can. But in this particular case, here's one more step here that I would do. I can go through here and maybe I can add vignettes to it. Remember I talked about where I want to darken areas. I can kind of darken around that. I can do that. You can kind of go over each one of these one at a time. That's kind of cool as a little grunge. So let's say I just want some of that grunge effect. I could do that. Okay. Same thing. I'll hit the brush. And again, in this case, I'm going to invert because I'm going to basically just paint in the areas that I want. Okay, I'm just going to exaggerate this so we can really mess this print up here for you guys. Let's just add some of that texture. You see that was kind of dark? It's because it's a texture overlay. But that's okay. I'm all right with that because I know that I can come back over here to my strength tab and just kind of add that. Okay, all right. That was just a little trick there. But technically, this is what I really want to do. If I want to add overall to tone down all this bright area, okay, if there's none of the effects library that you're seeing that has that look that you're looking for, the movie looks has some pretty cool stuff in here. Again, I've played around with all of these multiple times. Then I remember you still have this effects option that is really powerful. It has a lot of adjustments in here, whether you're doing black and whites, blur. A lot of times I love to do the blurring effect. See that? So if I want to keep attention off of here, same thing. All I'm going to have to do is open my brush, and I'm going to basically hit the X because I'm going to paint out, and see there? Take a look at that. There you go. You guys want to be fancy? Here we go. Let's open the inspector. Obviously bring it down so we can kind of gradually paint around it. There we go. See that? I don't want it to look too much there. All right. So I'm just doing this quickly here, guys. If you guys want to hang out with me for another hour, because I'm going to do this after I hang up with you guys. I'm working on some more images here. So, all right, here's my last step. You guys ready? Because there will be a test. I'm watching you guys here. So let's add one more effect here. So again, what I said earlier, I want the viewer to look at this subject. So I'd like to really darken it, but maybe I didn't see one that I like here. So this panel here is probably one of the most powerful effects in here. You just have to find it and play with it. So I'm going to come over back to my tone enhancer, okay? Tone enhancer, okay, right over here. Now what I'm going to do is this one allows me to add tone. I can add brightness to the image, contrast, darks, lights, etc., right? What I'm going to do here is I want to darken this image. So I'm going to come down here, what appears to be like a curve section, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this down, all the way down here like this, okay? There we go. All right, I'm going to lower this down, just like that. There we go. See all that hard work you guys did? And look what happened. We just totally got rid of it, okay? All right, there you go. That's the way you start with it, okay? Now what we're going to do now, the same thing. I'm going to add my brush, masking brush, which is those of you, I'm doing shortcuts, so I apologize if I'm not clicking properly here for you. But this is your adjustment brush up here. They do have a masking bug that's awesome. So if I select that as well, this allows me to just pick. Any of you have used focal point, this is awesome too, because this will actually be gradated. See this, how it gradates the effect underneath? Okay, let's move this over here for you guys. Hold on 1 second here. See how it kind of adds that for you, right? So I'm going to move it around. So if I want to gradually, this works great like on landscapes. You see how it just does that perfectly? That's gorgeous right there. Now if I don't want to do that, okay, let's go back and open my inspector. I'm going to reset that. Okay, because what I like to do, since I'm using a Wacom tablet, I'm going to use the masking brush. Is same thing. I'm going to hit I for the inspector, and I'm going to paint out the effect. Now that's what we want to do. We want to paint out that effect. Okay, so let's make sure we hit the right key here. Make sure, actually, let's make sure we're in the right layer. Okay, make sure we're in the right layer. There we go. We're on our tone enhancer. Open our brush. There we go. And basically, like I said, I can either choose to either paint in. Let me go back here. I can invert the effect. Okay, either paint out. Let's go back on this one here. Hang on 1 second here, guys. And I can lower this. Let's come back here to make sure I'm on the right panel here. There you go. Just like that, because that's kind of dark here. And same thing. It'll show me. Let's pick this right. There we go. Here's your brush, and you can paint in or paint out the effects just like that. And if I need to lower this a little bit, I can do that as well. So either way, this one works a little bit differently because see what it's done? It's allow you to make the adjustment just like that. Okay. So when I close out, let's go here to, there's your before and there's your after. See, that allows me to add that darkening to it. So either I'm going to paint out softly because I don't want to over, I'll work the strength slider a little bit just like that. And you can grab the handles. Okay, you can grab the handles if you want. Okay, like that. Okay, and there you go. It kind of adds that. So basically you're going from this to that quickly. And what I'll do is if I want to save that, if I want to save this image in the sense, obviously I hit apply. If I want to save it as a preset because I really like that effect, you saw I kind of blurred it out, it darkened it, I can save it as a preset, and then later on I'll name it Frank's blurry staircase photo, and then I can come back and apply that over again. And this has worked great for me as I'm working on wedding albums. I want to be able to lay out perhaps, again, maybe there's 3 or 4 images on that page, and may not necessarily have all of them like that, but in certain effects I want to apply that. Or even on another wedding album I'm working on, I say, oh man, I really like that effect I did. You know, it's easy to try to recreate it, but you can see here on this section. Now, if I did open a preset, let me show you one last thing. Let me hit this cancel. I'm going to show you to back up a preset for you. I'm going to hit cancel. Now, if I did apply a preset, just take me 2 seconds here. Oh, let's apply the same one. Let's go back into, hold on 1 second. The preset works great. Let me back one up here. Hold on. 1 second here, guys. Let's click on this. If I add a preset, okay, you're going to go back into effects. Okay, select the effects where we're at, and you'll open up our effects library below. And I want to just show you one last thing because this is cool. Because people ask me, well, how do they work, and how can you adjust it? So when you come back here to the presets, and I select one of the ones that I've created, and I'm just going to pick this one here. Okay, I'm going to click that. Okay, I selected. This is one I pre-built. So you notice it just has the name here. Well, down here below, when you see this button that says expand, take a look what happens. Keep your eye here. When I hit expand, take a look at what it's going to do. It now reveals the other type of effects that I've done in the past. And all I have to do is you can turn each of these layers off. Obviously, that's my empty layer, so I can either turn that off or I can, well, let's actually delete that one. There we go. I can delete that. So I'm on this layer here. I can come in, open the brush, same thing as I did earlier. Remember that? I'm just going to exaggerate this here, and see, I'm doing this sloppy here, guys, just so you can see. But see, I can come back and start going on the stack layer by layer, as you call it, and remove that. So that's how these presets work. So even though I gave you a preset of mine and you didn't like it, it's too powerful in certain sections, you can come through each one of these. You can shut off one, turn that off, come down here. This is maybe too yellow. You can add the effect there, and so on. So that's how the presets work. It's a great way to go back, let you fine tune them, because if you look at them just like this, it may say, oh, hey, the texture is over the dress or whatever, then you know that by working your preset, it's amazing how that works. So once again, if there's any questions, I think we got a couple minutes there. Brian will come back on the line here for us, and I can definitely answer those questions for you. And but I do want to thank you all for listening. I know we can go on, and I can show you tons of more images. But once again, what I like to share and say to all of you is that the inspiration as an artist, as a photographer, certainly we get inspired different ways. We get inspired by looking at other photos, other paintings. But when I bring in an image that I've only perhaps darkened and lightened and so on, you know, by having these particular softwares available for us, this is what's giving me the inspiration, or else I wouldn't have thought of it. I'd have to look at everybody else. So this allows me to be the one that's inspiring people than to the one that's, you know, being inspired by others. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. So Brian, I'll turn the reins over to you.